Account drained during procedure. Your belongings are packed. I'm with Richard now. Don't call. My name is Michael Donovan, 42 years old, sitting in a hospital bed in Portland at 6:17 a.m. on a Monday, staring at my phone with surgical staples still fresh in my abdomen. My wife, Vanessa, was supposed to be in the waiting room, anxious for news after my emergency appendectomy. The text came with a bank notification. $194,000 transferred from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize. I set my phone down and pressed the morphine pump once. 11 years of marriage ended with a text and a bank alert. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There had been signs, of course. Late nights at her interior design firm that couldn't be verified, new clothes and jewelry I never saw her wear at home, hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered a room. I noticed it all. I'm a commercial security consultant specializing in surveillance systems and asset protection. Noticing discrepancies is literally my job description. But I said nothing. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe my first mistake was marrying someone who thought my career was just spying on shoplifters and installing nanny cams. Vanessa never understood that my work protected businesses worth millions, secured intellectual property for tech companies, and occasionally assisted in corporate fraud investigations. To her, I was just the guy who installed cameras. What she didn't know was that I had installed them at home too. I reached for my phone again, wincing at the pull of stitches, and opened an app that Vanessa had no idea existed. 3 notifications from my home security system: motion detected in the master bedroom at 2:14 a.m., in the home office at 2:37 a.m., and the front door at 3:22 a.m. The surgery that I'd been rushed into at midnight had given her the perfect opportunity. I typed a single response to her message: noted. Then I called my sister Catherine. "That hidden camera system you convinced me to install last year," I said when she answered, voice still raspy from intubation. "I need you to check the footage." "Michael, aren't you in surgery?" She sounded groggy, confused. "It's done, but Vanessa's gone. She cleared out our accounts while I was under." Catherine was silent for a moment. "I'm on my way to the hospital. Do you want me to call the police?" "Not yet," I replied. "First, I need to see exactly what happened." I hung up and stared at the generic hospital art on the wall, a watercolor of mountains that looked nothing like the Cascades outside. I should have noticed the biggest sign of all. 3 months ago, Vanessa had suddenly stopped complaining about my paranoia regarding home security. I met Vanessa Collins at a charity event for the Portland Art Museum. I was there because my company had donated the security system. She was there representing her interior design firm. I was 31, recently divorced from a brief first marriage, and focused entirely on growing my security consultation business. Vanessa was 29, vibrant, creative, and completely dismissive of what I did for a living. "Cameras and alarms. How dreary," she'd said, sipping champagne. "I suppose someone has to think about those things so the rest of us can create beauty." Something about her confidence attracted me, the way she moved through the room as if she belonged in the center of attention. We married after 8 months of dating. I helped her expand her interior design business, investing nearly $200,000 from my savings. When she wanted a renovated craftsman in the West Hills with a view of the city, I agreed. When she needed a luxury SUV to transport clients and materials, I nodded and signed the papers. My father visited us for dinner one night, 6 months after we'd moved into the new house. He was a retired police detective, observant and measured in his judgments. As we grilled steaks on the deck while Vanessa was inside on a client call, he looked at me with concern. "Son, how much of your money is funding your wife's business and lifestyle?" he asked quietly. I bristled. "She's building something important to her dad. Her clients include some of the wealthiest families in Portland. He nodded slowly. Just make sure she values what you do to support that dream. Security isn't glamorous, but it matters. I changed the subject, but his words stayed with me. 4 years into our marriage, I began noticing irregularities. Credit card statements showed purchases at restaurants on days Vanessa claimed to be working late. There were weekend design conferences that left no digital footprint when I later searched for them. Small withdrawals from our accounts that added up to significant amounts over time. I'm ashamed to admit how long I ignored these signs. In my professional life, I counseled executives on protecting their assets and information from both external threats and internal theft. Yet in my personal life, I was failing to apply the same principles. Last year, during a home security upgrade, for a divorce attorney's residence, he mentioned something that struck me. Half my clients wish they'd had some kind of documentation before things went south, he said, as I installed motion sensors. By the time they come to me, it's usually one person's word against another's. Evidence matters. That night, I came home and looked at Vanessa, beautiful, distant Vanessa, as she scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging my return. Against every instinct that had preserved our increasingly fragile relationship, I made a decision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cameras went in the next week while she was at a 3-day design retreat in Seattle. Small, nearly invisible devices in common areas only, nothing in bathrooms or private spaces. I told myself it was just precautionary, that I was being paranoid, that they would never reveal anything concerning. For 6 months, they recorded nothing unusual. Just the empty rhythms of our increasingly separate lives, Vanessa coming home. Late, me leaving early, silent dinners when our schedules aligned. I almost removed them several times, feeling ashamed for doubting her. Then I met Richard Harlow. He came to a dinner party Vanessa hosted for industry connections. Richard was introduced as a real estate developer looking for an interior designer for his latest project. Tall, tanned, and 10 years my senior, he spoke with the easy confidence of old money. Throughout the evening, I noticed how Vanessa's body language changed around him, more animated, more engaged than I'd seen her in months. Richard is a huge opportunity for me, she said afterward, as we cleaned up. His development company is expanding all over the West Coast. I nodded, helping load the dishwasher. He seemed very interested in your ideas. She paused, giving me an odd look. Yes, well, he appreciates the value of good design. The implication hung in the air. Unlike you. 2 weeks later, my appendix ruptured during a late-night security system installation at a tech company across town. By the time I made it to the emergency room, infection was setting in. The last thing I remember before anesthesia was Vanessa standing at the foot of the gurney, phone in hand, saying she'd be waiting when I woke up. She wasn't. Catherine arrived at the hospital an hour after my call, laptop in hand, her face tight, with controlled anger. How bad is it? I asked as she sat up at the small tray table beside my bed. The accounts are definitely empty, she said, typing rapidly. I checked your banking app first, but I haven't looked at the footage yet. Are you sure you want to see this now? You just had major surgery. I need to know, I said simply. Catherine nodded and pulled up the security interface. The system was designed to save power and storage by recording only when motion was detected. She sorted by timestamp and started with the first alert from 2:14 a.m. The footage showed Vanessa entering our bedroom, phone to her ear. He's in surgery now, she said to someone. Yes, emergency appendectomy. Should be hours still. No, Richard, this is perfect timing. We couldn't have planned it better. My stomach tightened, pulling painfully at my stitches. The next clip showed her in our home office, methodically going through financial documents, taking photos of some with her phone, placing others in a folder. She sat at my computer, but the angle didn't show the screen. "What is she looking for?" Catherine murmured. "Passwords, account numbers," I replied. "Things she doesn't already have access to." The final clip showed Vanessa at our front door, suitcases beside her, speaking to someone just out of frame. Then Richard Harlow stepped into view, helping with her bags. Before they left, Vanessa took one last look around the house, her expression not regretful but calculating, as if mentally checking off items from a list. The door closed and the motion alert ended. "Should we call the police now?" Catherine asked, her voice gentle but firm. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. There's something else I need to check first." With Catherine's help, I logged into my secondary email, one Vanessa didn't know about, where I kept secure communications with high-value clients. I had notifications from my banking security system, which I'd set up independently from our regular accounts. The automatic alerts confirmed what I already suspected. Vanessa had attempted to access my business accounts too, but those required two-factor authentication that came to my phone. She'd also tried to change the beneficiary on my life insurance policy, but hadn't been able to complete the process. "She thought of almost everything," I said, more to myself than to Catherine. "Except the cameras," my sister replied. I nodded, slowly, "and except that securing assets is literally what I do for a living." 7 years into our marriage, when things had already begun to cool between us, I had established a separate LLC for my security consultation business. I'd created trust accounts, invested in properties under the business name, and maintained separate retirement funds that Vanessa knew nothing about. I hadn't done it out of suspicion then, merely prudent business practice based on advice from my financial advisor. Now, that decision seemed prescient. "I need to make some calls," I told Catherine. "But first, can you drive by the house? I want to know if she took anything else." Catherine squeezed my hand gently. "Already planned on it. You rest. I'll be back in a few hours." After she left, I called my attorney, Philip Grant. When he answered, I was direct. "Vanessa's gone. She emptied our joint accounts while I was in emergency surgery last night. I have video evidence of her and her lover planning it." Philip was silent for a moment. "Are you sure you want to pursue this, Michael? Sometimes it's cleaner to just walk away. She took nearly $200,000, Phil, and she tried to get into my business accounts too." "Ah," he said, understanding immediately. "This isn't about the marriage anymore." "No," I agreed. "It's about theft." By the time Catherine returned, I'd spoken with my bank's fraud department, initiated a claim on the unauthorized transfer, and sent Philip the security footage. The hospital staff had been in to check my incision and advised that I'd be staying another night for observation due to the severity of the infection they'd found during surgery. "The house is mostly intact," Catherine reported, sitting beside my bed. She took her clothes, jewelry, some of the art. The furniture's still there. She hesitated. "Your home office is a mess, though. Drawers pulled out, papers everywhere." I nodded. "Looking for financial documents, probably." "Michael," Catherine said carefully, "there's something else. When I was there, Richard Harlow showed up. He seemed surprised to see me, said he was picking up some things Vanessa had forgotten." My pulse quickened. "What happened?" I told him I knew everything, that we had it all on camera, and that he was trespassing on private property. He got very quiet, then left quickly. But I think he was there to check if there was evidence. I almost smiled. Almost. "Did he take, anything?" "No, but he was looking at the bookshelves in your office when I found him, at your technical manuals." That confirmed my suspicion. Vanessa hadn't just married me for financial support. She'd targeted me specifically because of my profession. The bitter irony was heavy, a security expert whose home was violated by the person he trusted most. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly." I showed Catherine, who had stayed overnight in the visitor's chair despite my protests. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let them wonder what I'm planning." The hospital discharged me that afternoon with strict instructions for wound care and rest. Catherine drove me to her house rather than mine. We both agreed I shouldn't return to the empty Craftsman yet. As we pulled into her driveway, I noticed a luxury SUV parked across the street. Richard Harlow sat behind the wheel, watching. "He followed us from the hospital," Catherine said quietly, reaching for her phone. "Don't call the police," I said. "I want to see what he does." We went inside, and through the front window I watched as Richard remained in his vehicle, occasionally looking at his phone. After about 20 minutes, he drove away. "What was that about?" Catherine asked. "Testing our reaction," I replied, "and probably reporting back to Vanessa." That evening, as I rested on Catherine's couch, my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. After nearly 36 hours of silence, she was finally calling. I put the phone on speaker so Catherine could hear. "Michael," Vanessa said when I answered, her voice carrying that artificial concern she used with difficult clients. "How are you feeling? I've been so worried." "Have you?" I replied flatly. "There's been a misunderstanding about our accounts," she continued smoothly. "I moved some money for safekeeping when you were in surgery. With you unable to make decisions, I was protecting our assets." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "Michael, are you there? I'm here just waiting for the truth." She sighed, dropping the concerned act. "Fine, I've left you, obviously. But I'm willing to be reasonable about dividing things. We can handle this like adults." "Like the adult who emptied joint accounts while her husband was in emergency surgery?" I asked. "Or like the adult who brought her lover to our house at 3 a.m. to pack her things?" The silence on her end told me everything. "How did you—" she began. "You know what I do for a living, Vanessa. Did you really think I wouldn't have security measures in place?" Another silence. "What exactly do you want, Michael?" "The money back in the accounts by noon tomorrow. All of it. Then we can discuss separation terms through our attorneys." "That's not possible," she said, an edge of panic in her voice. "The money is allocated already." "Allocated," I repeated. "To what? Richard's failing development projects? His underwater mortgages? His gambling debts?" Her sharp intake of breath confirmed my suspicions. I'd had Philip run a financial background check on Richard Harlow that morning. His development company existed primarily on paper, with more debt than assets and a trail of disgruntled investors across 3 states. "You don't understand," Vanessa said. "Richard has opportunities lined up that will triple our investment within months." "Your investment," I corrected, "made with stolen money." "It wasn't stealing. We're married. What's yours is mine." "That's for the courts to decide," I said calmly, "along with the fraud charges." "Fraud?" Her voice rose an octave. "You wouldn't." "Noon tomorrow, Vanessa. The money goes back or the police get the footage and financial records. Your choice." I ended the call and looked at Catherine, whose eyes were wide. "Will she do it?" she asked. "No," I said with certainty. "They've likely already spent some of it, and Richard won't let her return the rest. But now they know I have evidence." My prediction proved correct. The next day passed with no return of funds and no further contact from Vanessa or Richard. At exactly 12:01 p.m., I called Detective Marcus Reeves, an old friend from my father's days on the force, who now worked financial crimes. "I'd like to report a theft," I told him, and explained the situation. 3 hours later, I sat in an interview room at the Portland Police Bureau's Central Precinct, my surgical incision aching despite the medication, as I walked two detectives through the evidence. The security footage, bank records, and text messages painted a clear picture that went beyond a simple marital dispute. "Mr. Donovan," Detective Reeves said after reviewing everything, "this appears to be a clear case of fraud and theft. The timing, waiting until you were physically incapacitated, suggests premeditation." "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll issue a warrant for both of them. The bank has already frozen the remaining funds they could trace. With the video evidence, we have enough for criminal charges, not just civil." I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness where I expected satisfaction to be. "What about recovery of the funds?" "Some portion should be recoverable," he said cautiously, "but financial crimes like this, money disappears quickly. Don't expect all of it to come back." I wasn't worried. What Vanessa had taken was significant but far from everything I had. My business was secure, my separate investments untouched. The greatest wound was to my trust, not my finances. That evening, as Catherine drove me back to her house from the police station, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "You've ruined everything. Richard is gone. They froze his accounts too. I have nothing now. Are you satisfied?" I didn't respond immediately. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I'm not proud of, wanted to text back, "Noted." But instead, I set the phone aside and looked out the window at the Portland skyline, the lights blurring slightly as fatigue and medication caught up with me. "You're quiet," Catherine observed as we pulled into her driveway. "Just thinking about the waste of it all," I replied. 11 years ending like this." She turned off the engine and faced me. "This isn't your fault, Michael. You didn't drive her to this. She made calculated decisions." "I know," I said, "but I ignored the signs for years. Because you wanted to believe in your marriage. That's not a character flaw." Later that night, unable to sleep on Catherine's guest bed, I finally replied to Vanessa's message. What I wanted was honesty. What I wanted was a partner, not a planner. What I got was a lesson I needed to learn. The next day, Detective Reeves called with news. Richard Harlow had been arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico. They hadn't located Vanessa yet, but it was just a matter of time. Some of the money, about $70,000, had been recovered from a joint account Richard had recently opened. "He rolled on your wife immediately," Reeves told me. "Claims she approached him with the plan months ago, targeted him as much as she targeted you." I wasn't surprised. People like Richard and Vanessa rarely displayed loyalty when self-preservation was at stake. 2 days later, as I was finally feeling strong enough to shower without assistance, Catherine called up from downstairs. "Michael, you need to see this." I made my way down carefully to find her staring at her laptop screen. On it was a local news website with the headline, "Interior Designer Arrested in Hospital Fraud Scheme." Beneath it was Vanessa's booking photo. According to the article, Vanessa hadn't just targeted me. Police had found evidence in her design studio linking her to at least 3 other cases where wealthy clients had experienced theft or fraud after medical emergencies. She had been monitoring social media and personal connections for opportunities, people posting about upcoming surgeries or medical treatments, then using her access as their designer to enter homes or gain financial information while they were vulnerable. I sank onto the couch beside Catherine, a cold weight settling in my stomach. "She's done this before." Catherine nodded slowly. "And you would have been just another victim if you hadn't installed those cameras." In the weeks that followed, as my body healed and legal proceedings began, I learned more about the woman I had married. Vanessa Collins wasn't even her real name. Born Jessica Mercer in Spokane, she had changed her identity after a series of small-time cons in her 20s. Her interior design credentials were mostly fabricated, though she did have genuine talent. She had targeted me specifically after learning about my security business through a mutual acquaintance, seeing me as both a challenge and a source of steady income. Our divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward, given the criminal charges she faced. Her attorney advised her to agree to my terms without contest, hoping for leniency in the criminal case. In the end, I recovered about half of what she had taken, but the emotional cost was incalculable. 6 months later, as fall turned the Portland Hills to gold and crimson, I stood in the empty craftsman house that had once been our home. It was on the market now, priced to sell quickly. I had no desire to live there anymore, surrounded by memories of calculated deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Sentencing today. Do you want me to go with you?" I hadn't planned on attending. What would be the point? But something pulled me toward the courthouse anyway. Not revenge or satisfaction, just closure. "I'll go alone," I replied. "But thank you." The courtroom was nearly empty when I slipped in and took a seat in the back row. Vanessa sat beside her attorney, hair pulled back severely, jail-issued clothing hanging loosely on her frame. She looked older, diminished. When the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement before sentencing, she stood slowly. "I've made terrible choices," she said, voice echoing in the quiet room. "I hurt people who trusted me, who invited me into their lives and homes. There's no excuse for that." She paused, then turned slightly, scanning the courtroom. Our eyes met briefly before she continued. "I particularly want to apologize to my former husband. Of all the people I betrayed, he deserved it least." The judge sentenced her to 8 years, with possibility of parole after 5, plus restitution to all victims. As the bailiff led her away, she looked back once more, but I had already stood to leave. Outside on the courthouse steps, I breathed deeply, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. My phone buzzed with a notification. A potential client, a technology company concerned about intellectual property theft by a former employee. Work continued. Life continued. That evening, I sat on the deck of Catherine's house, where I was staying until closing on a new condo downtown. My father joined us for dinner, his aging face creased with concern. "How did it go today?" he asked, as we grilled salmon. "About as expected," I replied. "She'll serve time, pay what she can." He nodded thoughtfully. "And you? How are you serving your time?" I looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "The prison of distrust," he said gently, "the sentence of suspicion you might carry forward." I considered his words as we ate dinner, as Catherine told stories about her students, as the conversation drifted to plans for the holidays. Was I changed permanently? Would I see potential betrayal in every relationship going forward? Later, after they'd gone to bed, I sat alone with these questions. I thought about the cameras that had saved me, and how they represented both protection and disconnection. I thought about Vanessa, Jessica, and wondered what experiences had shaped her into someone who saw others only as opportunities for exploitation. The truth was uncomfortably simple. Trust would be harder now, but necessity would make it possible again. Connection required vulnerability, and vulnerability required risk. The alternative, isolation behind invisible cameras, was its own kind of emptiness. A week later, I moved into my new condo. I installed a security system, of course. I wasn't a fool, but I left the hidden cameras in their packaging, unused. Some protections came at too high a cost. Some risks were worth taking, even knowing the potential for pain. The betrayal had taken much from me, but it hadn't taken everything. I still had my business, which was thriving with new clients seeking protection in an increasingly vulnerable world. I had Catherine and my father, whose support had never wavered, and I had the hard-won wisdom that comes only through loss and recovery. 1 year after the surgery that had changed everything, I stood on the balcony of my condo, looking out at the city lights. My phone chimed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I heard you sold the security company. Congratulations. I hope you're well. V." I stared at the message, wondering how she had this information, how she had access to a phone in prison. Then I realized she was still trying to manipulate, still trying to extract information. The company wasn't for sale. She was fishing to see if my circumstances had changed. I deleted the message without responding and went back inside. On my desk lay contracts for a new project, developing security protocols for a hospital network to protect vulnerable patients from exploitation during medical emergencies. The system would be named Phoenix, for reasons the client wouldn't fully understand, but that made perfect sense to me. From the ashes of betrayal, something useful could still emerge. That, perhaps, was the only form of justice that truly mattered. In the end, my recovery from surgery was slower than expected. Infection had set in before the emergency appendectomy, leaving me weakened and confined to Catherine's guest room for longer than I'd planned. This forced inactivity gave me too much time to think, to replay moments from my marriage, searching for signs I should have recognized sooner. The morning after Vanessa's sentencing, I woke to find Catherine sitting at the foot of the bed, a folder in her hands, and an expression I couldn't quite read on her face. "What is it?" I asked, pushing myself upright against the pillows. Philip called. "Vanessa's attorney has proposed a settlement offer." She handed me the folder. "It's unusual." I opened it and scanned the document, my eyebrows rising with each paragraph. Vanessa was offering to relinquish all claims to our marital assets, the house, investments, even her own business, in exchange for me dropping the additional civil suit for emotional damages that Philip had filed on my behalf. "This doesn't make sense," I said, flipping to the second page. "She's already facing criminal charges. This civil suit is the least of her concerns." Catherine shrugged. "Philip thinks she's trying to protect something specific that might come out in civil discovery, something the criminal investigation hasn't uncovered yet." I read through the document again, this time more carefully. There's no mention of restitution for the stolen funds. "Exactly," Catherine said. "She's willing to give up everything except the money she took. Why would that be her priority while facing prison time?" It was a good question, one that hadn't been answered by the police investigation or the prosecution's case. Where had the remaining money gone? The authorities had recovered only about $70,000 from Richard Harlow, leaving over $120,000 unaccounted for. According to their financial records, Richard had gambled away some portion in a desperate attempt to multiply it before fleeing, but that still left a significant amount missing. "I need to talk to Detective Reeves," I said, reaching for my phone. The detective agreed to meet me later that day at a coffee shop near the precinct. He looked tired when he arrived, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying too many cases with too few resources. "The settlement offer," I said after we'd gotten our coffees, "does it strike you as strange?" Reeves sipped his Americano before answering. "Defendants make all kinds of deals when they're facing time. Most don't make logical sense to outsiders." "But this is specific," I pressed. "She's protecting the missing money. Why? She can't access it in prison." He set down his cup and leaned forward. "Between us, we think there's another partner involved, someone who hasn't been identified yet." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Not Richard Harlow." "Harlow was a patsy," Reeves said with certainty. "Useful for his name and connections, but not the brains of any operation. Your wife." He paused, correcting himself. "Vanessa or Jessica or whatever her real name is, she's smart. But this operation had a sophistication that suggests professional criminal enterprise." You think she's working with someone else? Someone who still has the money? He nodded slowly. The way the funds were moved, through multiple accounts, converted to cryptocurrency, then back to cash, that's not amateur work. That's someone who knows how to hide money from authorities. I thought about this as I stirred my cooling coffee. So by accepting this settlement, I might be helping her protect this third person. Possibly, Reeves admitted, but it's also possible she's just trying to hold on to whatever she can. We may never know where all the money went, Mr. Donovan. That's the reality of these cases. After he left, I sat alone at the table, turning over this new information. If Vanessa had been working with someone else, someone professional, then the betrayal was even deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just opportunistic, it was calculated from the very beginning. I called Philip from the coffee shop. Reject the settlement, I told him. I want the full discovery process. Whatever she's hiding, I want it exposed. That afternoon, Catherine drove me to my office for the first time since the surgery. My security consultation business operated from a converted warehouse in the industrial district. A deliberate choice that confused clients expecting glass towers but impressed them once they saw the sophisticated systems inside. My assistant, Mara, had been running day-to-day operations in my absence and from the stack of contracts on her desk, doing an excellent job. "The conquering hero returns," she said with a smile as I walked in slowly, still moving carefully to protect my healing incision. "Though you look more like you were the one conquered." "Thanks for holding down the fort," I replied, lowering myself gingerly into a chair. "Any fires I need to put out?" "Nothing urgent. Clients have been understanding about your medical leave." She hesitated. "They've also been curious about the news stories." The local business press had picked up on Vanessa's arrest and the connection to my company. Nothing sensational, but enough to raise questions among clients who trusted us with their security. "What have you been telling them?" "That you were the victim of a crime, that it has no bearing on our security protocols, and that you'll address any concerns personally when you return." She smiled slightly. Most seemed satisfied with that, especially when I reminded them that catching the perpetrator demonstrated the effectiveness of our systems. I couldn't help but laugh, despite the pain it caused in my abdomen. "Turning my personal disaster into a marketing opportunity, remind me to give you a raise." "Already added it to the budget projections," she replied smoothly, handing me a folder. "These need your attention today. The rest can wait until you're back full-time." As I reviewed contracts and proposals, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the surgery: normalcy. The familiar rhythm of work, the clarity of technical specifications and security assessments, grounded me in a way that weeks of recovery hadn't. Here, in this space, I was still competent, still in control. I was initialing the last document when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Some stones are better left unturned." I showed it to Catherine, who had been quietly working on her laptop in the corner of my office. "Vanessa?" she asked. "Maybe," I replied. "Or this mysterious partner Detective Reeves mentioned. You should tell the police." I nodded, forwarding the message to Reeves, then turned back to the work before me. The threat, because that's what it was, beneath the cryptic phrasing, only strengthened my resolve to uncover whatever Vanessa was hiding. That evening, as Catherine and I were leaving the office, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street, engine running. As we approached Catherine's car, the sedan pulled away, too quickly for me to see the driver or license plate. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Catherine, the car, what about it?" I hesitated. Was I becoming paranoid, seeing threats where none existed? Or was this hypervigilance a necessary adaptation to my new reality? "Nothing," I said finally. "Let's go home." But as we drove back to Catherine's house, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the sedan following us. It never appeared, yet the unease lingered. The next morning, I received a call from Philip. Vanessa's attorney came back with a revised settlement. She's now offering full financial disclosure in exchange for your dropping the emotional distress claims. She's bargaining, I said. She's worried about something specific in the discovery process. Almost certainly, Philip agreed. But this could work in our favor. If she's willing to provide complete financial records to avoid emotional distress, testimony, we might learn where the missing money went without a lengthy court battle. I thought about it. How confident are you that she'd provide actual, complete records? The agreement would include penalties for any omissions or false information, he said, and given her current legal situation, adding perjury charges wouldn't be in her best interest. Let me think about it, I said, but I already knew my answer. Following the money had always been my intention. The emotional aspects of the betrayal were private wounds that wouldn't heal any faster by being exposed in court. After hanging up, I noticed an email notification from an unfamiliar address. Elstone, 1977 mail. Calm. The subject line read simply, "Listen to your lawyer." The body of the email contained only one line: "Financial disclosure is your best option if you want to stay healthy." This was no longer cryptic. It was an explicit threat. I forwarded it immediately to Detective Reeves, then called him to make sure he'd seen it. "This changes things," he said after confirming receipt. "We'll need to assign an officer to check on you regularly, and I'd recommend accepting the settlement for now. It might be safer while we investigate these threats." "I'm not being intimidated into dropping this," I said firmly, "and I have security systems most people can't even comprehend. I'll be fine." Reeves sighed. "Your choice, Mr. Donovan, but remember that security systems don't stop bullets." His bluntness was sobering. I'd been thinking of this as a financial crime, a betrayal of trust, not something that might escalate to physical violence. Had I underestimated what Vanessa and her partners were involved in? That afternoon, I decided to return to my own house for the first time since the surgery. Catherine protested, but I insisted. "I need to see it," I told her. "I need to face whatever's there." She reluctantly drove me to the Craftsman in the West Hills. The house looked exactly as it had before: manicured lawn, elegant exterior, discreet security fixtures visible only to trained eyes like mine. Yet it felt entirely different knowing what had transpired inside. I used my key and entered slowly, almost expecting to find evidence of my life with Vanessa still present. Instead, the house felt sterile, impersonal. Catherine had told me Vanessa had taken her clothes and personal items, but I hadn't realized how thoroughly she had erased herself from our shared spaces. The art she had selected was gone from the walls, her books removed from shelves, even photographs that had included her were missing from frames. I moved through the rooms methodically, noting what was gone, what remained. In the master bedroom, her closet stood empty, hangers askew, as if she had grabbed clothing in haste. The bathroom contained none of her extensive collection of lotions and makeup. It was as if she had never lived here at all. The Home Office told a different story. Here, chaos remained from her search for financial documents. Drawers hung open, papers scattered across the floor, books pulled from shelves and discarded. I knelt carefully, mindful of my healing incision, and began sorting through the papers. Most were meaningless. Old utility bills, equipment manuals, notes from client meetings. But as I reorganized the mess, I noticed something odd. Certain files were missing. Specifically, records related to a security project I had consulted on 3 years ago for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. "What are you looking for?" Catherine asked from the doorway. "Something that's not here," I replied, frowning. Documents about a pharmaceutical client. Would Vanessa have had any reason to take those? I shook my head slowly. No. They weren't financial records, just technical specifications for their security system upgrade. But even as I said it, I remembered something. Meridian had been developing a promising new cancer treatment at the time. The security upgrades were specifically to protect their research data and intellectual property. The project had been highly confidential, with limited documentation even within my own files. "Call Detective Reeves," I told Catherine suddenly. "Tell him I need to meet him as soon as possible." She looked confused but complied, stepping into the hallway to make the call. Meanwhile, I sat at my desk and turned on my computer, relieved to find it still functional. Vanessa had attempted to access it. The login screen showed multiple failed attempts, but my encryption had held. I bypassed the standard login using a hardware key I kept on my personal keychain, then accessed my secure client database. The Meridian files were there, digitally intact, but the fact that Vanessa had sought out the physical copies was deeply concerning. Catherine returned. "Reeves can meet you at the precinct in an hour." I nodded, still focused on the computer. "I need to check something first." I pulled up news archives, searching for any recent information about Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The results confirmed my suspicion. 6 months ago, Meridian had announced a breakthrough in their cancer treatment research. Their stock had soared, and they were now in the final stages of FDA approval. "What is it?" Catherine asked, watching my expression. "I think I know what Vanessa might have been involved in," I said quietly. "Corporate espionage." At the police station, I explained my theory to Detective Reeves, that Vanessa's crimes might extend beyond marital fraud to stealing corporate secrets. The missing Meridian documents, combined with the timing of their breakthrough and the sophisticated money movement, suggested a connection. "You think she was selling pharmaceutical information?" Reeves asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "Or her partner was," I replied. "The missing money could be payment for stolen research data." Reeves leaned back in his chair, considering. "It's possible. Industrial espionage is lucrative, and pharmaceuticals are prime targets." He made a note on his pad. "I'll contact the FBI's white-collar division. If there's a corporate angle to this, it falls under their jurisdiction." "What about the threats?" I asked. "Those we take very seriously," he said firmly. "I've assigned a patrol car to drive by your sister's house regularly, and I'd strongly advise accepting the financial disclosure settlement now. It might appease whoever is making these threats while we investigate." After consulting with Philip, I reluctantly agreed to the revised settlement terms. Vanessa would provide complete financial records in exchange for my dropping the emotional distress claims. It felt like a concession, but Philip assured me it was strategic. "We're not giving up," he said during a conference call that evening. "We're just approaching from a different angle. If your theory about corporate espionage is correct, those financial records could provide the evidence needed for federal charges." The next morning, I returned to work officially, despite Catherine's concerns about the threats. "I can't hide indefinitely," I told her, "and my office has better security than most government buildings." This wasn't an exaggeration. After years of consulting on high-level security for corporate clients, I had implemented the best systems in my own workspace. Biometric access controls, surveillance coverage without blind spots, panic buttons linked directly to emergency services, and other measures I didn't discuss even with family. Mara greeted me with her usual efficiency, updating me on client needs and new security assessments that required attention. For several hours, I lost myself in work, the familiar technical challenges providing a welcome distraction from personal turmoil. Around noon, I received an email from Philip containing the first batch of Vanessa's financial records, provided as part of our settlement agreement. As I scanned through the documents, something caught my attention. Regular payments from an offshore account to a shell company registered in Delaware, beginning shortly after my consultation with Meridian Pharmaceuticals and continuing until just before Vanessa's arrest. I forwarded the information to Detective Reeves with a note explaining the correlation to the Meridian timeline. His response came quickly. FBI is interested. Special Agent Lynn will contact you directly. Less than an hour later, my office phone rang. Mr. Donovan, this is Special Agent Emily Lynn, FBI. I understand you may have information regarding a corporate espionage case we've been developing. Her voice was crisp, professional, but with an underlying intensity that suggested my information had struck a nerve. We arranged to meet at my office later that afternoon, her preference over the local precinct. Your security is probably better, she said, a comment that might have been flattering under different circumstances. When Agent Lynn arrived, she wasn't what I expected. Young, perhaps early 30s, dressed in a simple suit rather than the stereotypical FBI attire. But her eyes were sharp, missing nothing, as she scanned my office before sitting down. We've been investigating information leaks at several pharmaceutical companies for the past 18 months, she said without preamble. Meridian is one of them. Until now, we haven't been able to identify the source or the buyers. I explained my connection to Meridian, the missing documents, and the financial transactions I'd discovered in Vanessa's records. The payments aligned perfectly with known data breaches, Agent Lynn confirmed. But we've been looking for someone inside these companies. Your wife, ex-wife, I corrected automatically. Ex-wife, she amended, had no direct connection to Meridian or any other pharmaceutical company we're investigating. No, I agreed, but as an interior designer with wealthy clients, she had access to their homes, and through me, she knew which executives might have valuable information. The realization was sickening. She used my client list to target people. Agent Lynn nodded slowly. It fits. Executives working from home, discussing confidential matters, accessing secure servers. A skilled operative could gather valuable intelligence just by being in the right homes at the right times. Vanessa isn't a skilled operative, I said. She's a con artist, yes, but this level of espionage suggests training. Which returns us to your theory about a partner. Agent Lynn pulled out a tablet and showed me a photograph. Does this man look familiar? The image showed a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, silver-haired and expensively dressed, entering what appeared to be a charity gala. That's Victor Crane, I said immediately. He's on several philanthropic boards in Portland. I've seen him at charity events. I paused, a memory surfacing, including the art museum fundraiser where I met Vanessa. Agent Lynn's expression remained neutral, but I could tell this confirmed something for her. Victor Crane is an alias. His real name is Vitaly Krasnov, former intelligence officer for a foreign government, now freelance corporate spy. We believe he orchestrates information theft from multiple industries, using various operatives who have no knowledge of each other. The implications were staggering. You think Vanessa was working for him? That our entire marriage was part of an operation? We don't know the extent of their relationship, Agent Lynn said carefully, but the financial transactions you've identified could be payments for information she gathered. The question is whether she was a knowing participant from the beginning or recruited later. Either possibility was painful to consider. Had I been nothing but a mark to Vanessa from our first meeting? Or had our marriage been real until Crane Krasnov approached her with an offer she couldn't refuse? What happens now? I asked. We'll add this information to our investigation, Agent Lynn replied, standing to leave. The threats you've received suggest you've disrupted their operation, which means you're still at risk. I'd recommend accepting protective surveillance until we locate Krasnov." After she left, I sat at my desk, trying to process this new dimension of betrayal. It was one thing to be the victim of a con artist seeking financial gain. It was another entirely to learn I might have been collateral damage in an international corporate espionage scheme. That evening, as Catherine drove us back to her house, I noticed the same dark sedan I'd seen previously, 3 cars behind us. This time I was certain it was following us. "Don't react," I said quietly to Catherine, "but we're being followed. Dark sedan, license plate partially visible, begins with RXJ." To her credit, Catherine didn't turn around or change her driving pattern. What do we do? "Take the next right, then another immediate right. That'll put us on a loop. If they follow both turns, we'll know for sure." She executed the maneuver smoothly, and sure enough, the sedan made both turns. I texted Detective Reeves the partial plate number and our location, while directing Catherine to drive toward the nearest police station. As we approached the station, the sedan abruptly turned off, disappearing down a side street. We continued to the station anyway, where I reported the incident to the officer at the front desk, who promised to alert patrols in the area. "This is getting dangerous," Catherine said as we finally headed home. "Maybe you should accept the FBI's protection offer." I nodded slowly. "I'll call Agent Lin tomorrow, but tonight I need to do something else first." Back at Catherine's house, I set up my laptop at the kitchen table and pulled up the security camera footage from the art museum fundraiser where I'd met Vanessa. Footage I'd accessed as part of a security assessment for the museum the following year and had kept for reference. Hours of video from multiple angles showed the elegant crowd, including my younger self moving awkwardly through conversations. I found Vanessa easily, her red dress distinctive among the black tie crowd. And then I found what I was looking for, a brief interaction between Vanessa and Viktor Crane, Vitaly Krasnov, occurring nearly 20 minutes before she approached me. It wasn't definitive proof that our meeting had been orchestrated, but it established a connection that preceded our relationship. As I watched them speak, their body language suggested familiarity rather than a first meeting. I downloaded the clip and sent it to Agent Lin with a brief explanation. Her response came minutes later. "This is valuable evidence. We'll have a protection detail at your location within the hour." Catherine, watching over my shoulder, squeezed my arm gently. "I'm so sorry, Michael." I closed the laptop, suddenly exhausted. The weight of these revelations, that my 11-year marriage may have been nothing but an elaborate operation from the very beginning, was almost impossible to bear. "The strangest part," I said quietly, "is that I still don't know what was real. Were there moments when she actually cared, or was every kindness, every intimate conversation just part of her cover?" Catherine had no answer, and truthfully, I didn't expect one. Some questions have no satisfying resolution, even for someone who spent their career seeking clarity through surveillance and security. As promised, FBI agents arrived within the hour to establish a protection detail around Catherine's house. Agent Lin herself accompanied them, reviewing the footage I'd discovered and asking detailed questions about my history with Vanessa and any connections to Viktor Crane that I might have forgotten. "We believe he's still in the Portland area," she told me. "Your discovery of the Meridian connection has accelerated our timeline for apprehending him. Until we do, you remain at risk." I nodded, too drained to feel proper concern for my own safety. "What about Vanessa? Is she at risk too?" "She's in custody," Agent Lin reminded me, "but we've added additional security to her holding facility as a precaution. Krasnov has a history of eliminating loose ends." The clinical way she described It sent a chill through me. Despite everything, I didn't want Vanessa dead. I wanted answers. I wanted to know how much of my life had been a calculated lie. As Agent Lynn prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. Mr. Donovan, in my experience with cases like this, knowing the full truth rarely brings the closure people hope for. Sometimes uncertainty is easier to live with than confirmation of our worst fears. Her words stayed with me as I tried to sleep that night. Agents positioned outside the house and a sidearm-wearing FBI analyst in Catherine's living room. Was Agent Lynn right? Would I be better off never knowing whether my entire marriage had been a sham from the beginning? The answer came to me as I drifted into uneasy sleep. I had built my career on the principle that knowledge, however painful, was always preferable to vulnerability through ignorance. I wouldn't start doubting that principle now, when it mattered most. I woke before dawn to the sound of hushed voices in Catherine's living room. Agent Lynn had returned and was speaking with the overnight security detail. Pulling on a robe, I made my way downstairs, careful of my still-healing incision. "Mr. Donovan," Agent Lynn acknowledged me with a nod. "Sorry to disturb you so early." "What's happened?" I asked, noting the tension in her posture. "We've identified Krasnov's location," she said. "A rental property in the Columbia River Gorge. We're preparing to move in, but there's a complication." She hesitated. "He's demanding to speak with you." "Me? Why?" "We don't know. He contacted us through an encrypted channel, saying he has information you want, but he'll only share it in person." I sat down slowly, processing this. "It's obviously a trap." "Almost certainly," she agreed, "which is why we're not considering it. I just thought you should know." But something about the situation nagged at me. How did he contact you? How did he even know the FBI was involved? Agent Lynn's expression tightened. "That's concerning us as well. It suggests he has sources inside law enforcement." The implications were clear. No matter how tight the security around me, if Krasnov had inside information, I wasn't truly safe anywhere. "What if we controlled the meeting?" I suggested. "Set terms that minimize risk?" "Absolutely not," Catherine interjected from the doorway, where she'd been listening. "Michael, you can't be serious." Agent Lynn studied me thoughtfully. "What are you proposing?" "A public location. Full surveillance. FBI agents positioned throughout. He'd have to come unarmed and alone." "He'd never agree to that," Agent Lynn said. "He might if he believes I have something he needs." "And what would that be?" I thought quickly. "The complete security footage from my home system. I told the police I had cameras, but no one knows exactly what they captured. Krasnov can't be certain what evidence I have against him." Agent Lynn considered this, her analytical mind visibly working through scenarios. "It's extremely high risk. So is waiting for him to find another way to get to me," I countered. "At least this way, we choose the battlefield." After extensive discussion and over Catherine's continued objections, a plan took shape. We would arrange a meeting at Pioneer Courthouse Square, Portland's living room, an open public space, downtown with multiple access points and clear sightlines for surveillance. The FBI would have agents positioned throughout, with snipers on surrounding rooftops and a tactical team ready to move in. I would wear a concealed microphone and tracking device. The meeting would be limited to 15 minutes in broad daylight, with specific protocols for approach and retreat. Every aspect was designed to minimize risk while allowing the FBI their best chance to apprehend one of their most wanted targets. As preparations continued throughout the morning, Catherine pulled me aside in the kitchen. "This is insane," she said, voice low with controlled anger. "You're not a trained agent. You're still recovering from surgery. And for what? To confront the man who orchestrated your wife's betrayal?" I understood her concern, but she was missing the point. "This isn't about confrontation or revenge," I explained. "It's about regaining control. For months, years maybe. These people have been manipulating my life, using me for their purposes. This is my chance to turn the tables. Catherine studied my face. There's more to it, isn't there? I sighed, leaning against the counter. I need to know, Catherine. I need to know if any of it was real. If there was ever a moment in 11 years when Vanessa actually cared. My sister's expression softened with understanding. And you think this man will tell you the truth? Probably not, I admitted. But I'll know. Reading people, spotting deception. It's what I do professionally. I'll see it in his face when he answers. Catherine didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. Just promise me you'll follow every safety protocol. To the letter. I promise, I said, embracing her carefully. I didn't survive a ruptured appendix and a thieving wife just to get taken out by a spy in a public square. By noon, everything was in place. I sat on a bench in Pioneer Courthouse Square, wearing a wireless earpiece through which Agent Lin could communicate with me. The spring day was perfect for our purposes, busy enough that Krasnov couldn't attempt anything without witnesses, but not so crowded that the FBI would lose visual control. Subject approaching from southwest corner, Lin's voice said in my ear. Grey suit, blue tie, newspaper under his arm. I spotted him immediately, the same distinguished figure from the photograph, moving with the confident ease of someone accustomed to blending into any environment. Nothing about him triggered alarm. He looked like any successful businessman enjoying his lunch break. He sat beside me on the bench, leaving appropriate social distance, and opened his newspaper. To anyone watching, we were strangers sharing a public space. Mr. Donovan, he said without looking at me, his accent barely detectable beneath perfect English, thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm curious why you wanted to, I replied, keeping my gaze forward as instructed. Mutual benefit, he said. Simply, you have questions, I have a problem, perhaps we can help each other. I'm not interested in making deals with the man who used my wife to steal corporate secrets. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Is that what you believe happened? How provincial. Enlighten me, then, I challenged, fighting to keep my voice level. Your wife, former wife, he corrected himself with the same precision, I had used with Agent Lin, came to me, not the other way around. 3 years into your marriage, she approached me at a charity function, offering access to your client information. This wasn't what I had expected. Why would she do that? Money, primarily. Your business was successful, but not extravagant. Jessica, or Vanessa as you knew her, had expensive tastes and limited patience. He turned a page of his newspaper casually. But there was something else. Resentment. She felt intellectually underestimated by you specifically. The claim stung because it contained a grain of plausibility. I had never fully included Vanessa in my professional life, assuming she wasn't interested in the technical aspects of my work. So she just happened to approach one of the world's leading corporate spies at a charity event, I asked skeptically. Of course not, Krasnov replied. She approached several potential buyers before finding me. Amateur behavior, which I corrected once we established our arrangement. And what exactly was this arrangement? Information brokering. She provided access to executives' homes and offices through her design business, planted surveillance, devices I provided, and occasionally copied documents when opportunity arose. Your client list was particularly valuable. Pre-vetted targets with significant intellectual property to protect. Each word was a fresh wound, confirming that Vanessa had not only betrayed me personally, but had weaponized our relationship. Against my professional reputation, the clients who had trusted me had been compromised because of my own blindness. And our marriage? Was that ever real? I asked, the question I'd come to have answered. Krasnov was silent for a moment. I am not a marriage counselor, Mr. Donovan. I cannot tell you what was in her heart. But you can tell me when it changed, I pressed, when she went from my wife to your operative. He sighed slightly, as if dealing with a stubborn child. People are rarely so binary. Jessica maintained compartments in her life. What she did, for me, may have had no bearing on her feelings for you. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He folded his newspaper precisely. Now, to my problem. The authorities have frozen certain accounts based on information you provided. Assets that belong to clients who are impatient to recover them. And you think I can help with that? I think you can clarify to the FBI which transactions were related to Jessica's activities and which were legitimate business dealings unrelated to our arrangement. It would release substantial funds currently in limbo. Why would I do that? Because I can offer something in return. He placed a small USB drive on the bench between us. This contains the original surveillance footage from your home for the past 3 years. Jessica installed cameras long before you did, Mr. Donovan. Every room, every conversation, all preserved. My blood went cold. That's impossible. I would have found them. Would you? He smiled thinly. They were installed by professionals using technology not commercially available, embedded in objects your wife selected for your home. That statement piece in your living room, the unusual light fixture in your bedroom, all designed to monitor you. The violation was so profound, I momentarily forgot about the FBI agents watching us, the mission to capture this man. My entire home, my private sanctuary, had been a surveillance set. Why? I managed to ask. Why monitor me specifically? Insurance, Krasnov said simply. Jessica worried you might discover her activities. This ensured she would have leverage if needed. He tapped the USB drive. It also contains evidence of her other targets, corporate executives whose homes she accessed, information that would be valuable to the FBI's investigation. You're selling out your own operative? I asked incredulously. Jessica made a critical error, he said, his tone hardening. She attempted to cut me out, to deal directly with buyers using my connections. Then she stole funds intended for distribution to those clients. Her arrest was inconvenient timing. Suddenly, the missing money made sense. Vanessa hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been embezzling from Krasnov's operation, perhaps planning to disappear with Richard before the theft was discovered. So, this meeting isn't about helping me at all, I said. You're trying to salvage your professional relationships by recovering stolen funds and throwing Vanessa to the wolves. A crude assessment, but not entirely inaccurate. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket. The USB drive contains everything the FBI needs to clear legitimate accounts while prosecuting Jessica for the full extent of her crimes. I suggest you use it wisely. As he turned to leave, I finally looked directly at him. You miscalculated, you know. This meeting wasn't my idea. It was the FBI's. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine emotion cross his face. Surprise, quickly, masked by resignation. He glanced around the square, now noticing the 2 casual figures converging slowly on our position. Interesting, he said, his voice betraying no concern. A gambit I should have anticipated from someone in your profession. He gave a small nod of professional respect. Until we meet again, Mr. Donovan. There won't be a next time, I replied. As Agent Lin's voice urgently instructed me to move away from him, Krasnov smiled. There is always a next time. What happened next occurred with bewildering speed. As FBI agents closed in, smoke suddenly erupted from trash cans positioned around the square, not harmful but disorienting. In the confusion, I lost sight of Krasnov. Agent Lin was beside me in seconds, pulling me toward a predetermined extraction point, while tactical teams swept through the square. But Vitaly Krasnov had vanished. He prepared for this contingency, Agent Lin said tightly as we reached a secure vehicle. We have teams searching, but she didn't need to finish. A man with Krasnov's resources and experience wouldn't be found unless he wanted to be. He left this, I said, handing her the USB drive. He claims it contains surveillance footage from my home and evidence against Vanessa and other targets. Agent Lin took it carefully, already signaling for a forensic tech. We'll examine it in a secure environment. It could be valuable evidence, or it could be malware designed to infiltrate our systems. Back at the FBI's Portland field office, I waited while they analyzed the drive's contents. Catherine had joined me, furious about the outcome, but relieved I was unharmed. The surgical site ached from the sudden movements during evacuation, a reminder of my physical vulnerability. "The good news," Agent Lin said, when she finally returned to the conference room where we waited, "is that the drive wasn't booby-trapped. It contains exactly what Krasnov claimed: surveillance footage and extensive documentation of corporate espionage operations." "And the bad news?" I asked. "Krasnov is gone. We've lost his trail completely." She sat across from me. "But the information he provided gives us enough to prosecute Vanessa Mercer for industrial espionage on top of her existing charges. It also implicates several other operatives in his network. Why would he sacrifice his own operation?" Catherine asked. "He's cutting losses," Agent Lin explained. "This particular network was compromised once Vanessa was arrested. By giving us information about it, he buys goodwill he might leverage later while eliminating operatives who failed him." "Cold-blooded," Catherine murmured. "Pragmatic," Agent Lin corrected, "from his perspective." "What about the footage from my home?" I asked, dreading the answer. Agent Lin's expression softened slightly. "It's extensive. 3 years of surveillance, primarily focused on your home office and living areas. The invasion of privacy was overwhelming. Years of intimate moments, private conversations, vulnerability, all captured and preserved by someone I had trusted, completely." "I'd like to see it," I said quietly. Agent Lin exchanged glances with Catherine. "We can arrange that, but I should warn you, reviewing this kind of personal surveillance can be deeply distressing." "I understand, but I need to know what she saw, what she reported." After some discussion, arrangements were made for me to view selected portions of the footage in a private room at the FBI office. Catherine insisted on staying with me, a silent support as I confronted the evidence of Vanessa's betrayal. The earliest recordings showed me working in my home office, unaware of being observed. Vanessa occasionally entered, engaging me in seemingly normal domestic conversations while strategically viewing documents on my desk or computer screen. Later footage showed her photographing files when I was out of the room, installing small devices near my computer and making coded phone calls when she thought I was sleeping. But the most revealing footage came from our living room 6 months before her arrest. Vanessa sat alone, speaking on the phone in a manner I'd never witnessed. Confident, clinical, using technical terminology I didn't know she understood. "The Meridian executive is bringing work home this weekend," she said to someone, presumably Krasnov. "Phase 3 trials data. I'll have access Saturday during the charity luncheon his wife is hosting." A pause. "No, Donovan suspects nothing. He's focused on the Westlake account." Another pause. "Of course I can handle it. I've been managing him for years." The dismissive tone, the casual reference to managing me, it confirmed everything I had feared. Whatever our marriage had been in the beginning, by this point I was merely an asset to be maintained, a useful tool in her operation. I asked Agent Lin to stop the playback, needing a moment to collect myself. "There's one more segment you should see," she said gently. "It's from about 2 years ago." The footage showed Vanessa in our bedroom, again on the phone, but her demeanor was different, agitated, emotional. "I can't do this anymore," she was saying. It's too complicated. He trusts me completely. A pause. No, that's not the problem. The problem is I'm starting to... She stopped herself. I'm compromised, emotionally. I need extraction. The person on the other end must have refused, because Vanessa's expression hardened. Then increase my percentage. If I have to live this lie, I want compensation proportional to the psychological cost. Another pause. Fine, 20% of all intelligence proceeds, and a guaranteed exit strategy when I say it's time. I watched her face as she negotiated, seeing something I hadn't expected. Genuine conflict. For at least that moment, Vanessa had struggled with her dual role. It wasn't love, perhaps not even genuine care, but it was human ambivalence rather than pure calculation. As the playback ended, I sat in silence, absorbing what I'd seen. It doesn't excuse anything, Catherine said quietly beside me. But at least she wasn't a complete sociopath, I finished. Just someone who chose money over integrity, over me. Agent Lin closed the laptop. We've identified at least 6 corporate executives whose confidential information was compromised through similar methods. Your ex-wife's design business gave her access to homes and offices most industrial spies could never penetrate. What happens now? I asked. We add these charges to her case. With this evidence, she's looking at a significantly longer sentence. Agent Lin hesitated. There's also the matter of your home. Given the extent of surveillance devices installed, we recommend a complete security sweep before you return. I shook my head slowly. I'm not going back. I'll sell it as soon as possible. Some places couldn't be reclaimed once violated. Some trust couldn't be rebuilt once broken. The house that had once been my home was now just evidence of an elaborate deception, a stage set for a performance that had lasted 11 years. In the days that followed, while FBI technical teams swept my house and office for additional surveillance devices, I stayed with Catherine, but spent most of my time at work. Immersing myself in security consultations for clients felt both ironic and therapeutic, using my expertise to protect others when I had failed to protect myself. One afternoon, a week after the Pioneer Square meeting, Agent Lin visited my office with an update. We've completed our analysis of Krasnov's USB drive, she said. Besides the surveillance footage, it contained detailed financial records of transactions related to the information Vanessa gathered. Anything useful for your investigation? I asked. Very. We've identified multiple corporations that purchased stolen information, and we're building cases against them. She placed a folder on my desk. But we also found something you should know about. Inside the folder was a single document, a contract between Vitaly Krasnov and Jessica Mercer, Vanessa's real name, dated 9 months before I met her. This appears to be her original recruitment agreement, Agent Lin explained. Note the second paragraph. I read it carefully, then reread it, sure I had misunderstood. This says she was specifically tasked with establishing a relationship. With me, before we ever met? Agent Lin nodded grimly. According to this, Krasnov identified you as a valuable target because of your client list and security expertise. Vanessa was assigned to cultivate a relationship that would give her access to your professional information. The revelation was both devastating and strangely relieving. Our entire relationship, from the chance meeting at the museum fundraiser to our courtship and marriage, had been orchestrated. The woman I had loved had been playing a role from the very first moment. So nothing was real, I said, the words hollow in my office. That's not necessarily true, Agent Lin replied, surprising me. Operatives in deep cover often develop genuine feelings despite their mission. The video we saw where she requested extraction due to emotional complications, that suggests authentic conflict. You're being kind, I said, but the evidence is clear. I was a mark from the beginning. Agent Lynn didn't argue, but her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. My interpretation was complete. She left shortly after, promising to keep me updated on the investigation's progress. Alone in my office, I struggled to process this final revelation. There was a strange clarity in knowing the entire relationship had been fraudulent from its inception. No need to analyze where things went wrong, when real affection might have turned to exploitation. It had all been a mission, a job Vanessa had been recruited to perform. Yet despite this clarity, questions lingered. The conflict I'd witnessed in that video footage seemed genuine. Had she developed real feelings despite her assignment? Had there been moments when the woman I loved had actually existed, emerging, beyond her handler's instructions? I might never know the truth. Perhaps that uncertainty was the final cruelty of Vanessa's deception, leaving me forever questioning which moments had been authentic and which had been performed. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, my phone chimed with a notification. An email had arrived from an anonymous address containing only a video file. Against better judgment, I opened it on my secure system. The video showed Vanessa in a prison interview room, speaking with Agent Lynn. The timestamp indicated it was recorded just 2 days earlier. "I need you to understand something," Vanessa was saying, her prison jumpsuit a stark contrast to the elegant woman I had known. "My relationship with Michael wasn't just an assignment. The contract we found suggests otherwise," Agent Lynn replied off camera. "The contract was real," Vanessa acknowledged. "I was recruited to get close to him, but what happened after?" She hesitated. Krasnov didn't anticipate that I might actually care for him. "Yet you stole from him," Agent Lynn noted. "You betrayed his trust professionally and personally." Vanessa looked directly at the camera then, as if she knew I would eventually see this recording. I compartmentalized. The woman who loved Michael was separate from the operative who used his connections. It's not an excuse, just the truth. "Did you ever consider telling him? Getting out?" "Many times," Vanessa admitted, "but Krasnov made it clear what happens to operatives who try to leave. And later, when I finally had enough leverage and money to disappear," she shook her head, "I convinced myself Michael would be better off without me, that a clean break was kinder than the truth. So, emptying his bank account while he was in surgery was an act of kindness?" Agent Lynn's voice was skeptical. "No," Vanessa said quietly, "that was desperation. Krasnov discovered I was planning to leave his organization. The money was meant to be my escape fund, mine and Richard's. I made a choice to save myself at Michael's expense." She looked down at her hands. "It was unforgivable. But I need him to know that not everything was a lie." The video ended abruptly. I sat staring at the blank screen, emotions churning. Was this another manipulation, a calculated attempt to garner sympathy that might translate to leniency? Or was it the closest thing to honesty Vanessa had ever offered me? I would likely never know with certainty. That was the nature of deception at this level. It poisoned every interaction with doubt, made every declaration of feeling suspect. What I did know was that I had survived. Not just the physical trauma of a ruptured appendix, but the deeper wound of profound betrayal. I had been targeted, used, and discarded by professionals who exploited trust as a tactical resource. Yet, here I was, rebuilding, reclaiming my expertise, not as a source of shame for having been fooled, but as the very tool that had ultimately exposed the truth. My phone rang. Catherine, checking on me as she did each evening. The simple, genuine concern in her voice was a stark reminder that authentic connection existed, even in a world where trust could be weaponized. "I'm fine," I told her, and was surprised to realize it wasn't entirely a lie. "I'm finally seeing everything clearly." The clarity wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary, a foundation upon which to build whatever came next. Not in spite of this experience, but because of it. The skills that made me valuable to Krasnov and Vanessa, my attention to detail, my understanding of security and human vulnerability, were the same skills that would protect me and others going forward. As I drove to Catherine's house that night, I felt something unexpected beneath the lingering pain and disillusionment. Purpose. There were others like me, targeted for their expertise, manipulated through their trust, vulnerable despite their professional knowledge. Perhaps my experience, painful as it was, could help protect them from similar predators. The betrayal had taken much from me, but it had not taken everything. And what remained? My expertise, my clarity, my hard-won wisdom, might prove more valuable than anything I had lost. 6 months after my surgery and Vanessa's betrayal, I stood in an empty conference room at the Portland Convention Center, preparing to address 200 security professionals. My presentation, titled "When Security Experts Become Targets, Personal Lessons in Vulnerability," had drawn unexpected interest from across the industry. "5 minutes, Mr. Donovan," the event coordinator said, poking her head through the door. I nodded, adjusting my tie and reviewing my notes one last time. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent my career helping others protect their assets and information, only to become the victim of one of the most intimate security breaches possible. Now I was turning that painful experience into a professional asset. Agent Lin had encouraged this path when we last spoke. "Your story is unique," she'd said. "Most corporate security experts understand external threats, but few have experienced the psychological dimensions of betrayal from within their inner circle." The case against Vanessa had progressed rapidly. With the evidence from Krasnov's USB drive, prosecutors had filed additional charges of industrial espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy. She had eventually accepted a plea agreement, 12 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 8 in exchange for information about Krasnov's network and operations. Krasnov himself remained at large, though the FBI had dismantled significant portions of his operation using information Vanessa provided. Agent Lin believed he had likely relocated to Eastern Europe, rebuilding his network with greater caution after our encounter in Pioneer Square. As for me, the month since had been a journey of reconstruction, professional and personal. I had sold the compromised house in the West Hills, using part of the proceeds to purchase a modest modern apartment downtown with state-of-the-art security I installed myself. My company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived, as my experience gave me unique credibility in consulting on insider threats. 2 minutes, the coordinator called. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Public speaking had never been my strength, but this presentation felt necessary, not just for the audience, but for my own healing. Catherine appeared at the door, giving me an encouraging smile. She had been my unwavering support throughout, even helping me prepare this presentation. "Full house," she said, "standing room only." "No pressure," I replied with a nervous laugh. "You've got this," she assured me. "Just tell your truth." As I walked onto the stage, minutes later, facing a sea of attentive faces, I felt a calm replace my anxiety. These were my peers, people who understood security, who respected expertise, who recognized that sometimes the greatest insights came from painful experience. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "This isn't a presentation I ever expected to give. For most of my career, I focused on technical solutions to security challenges, surveillance systems, access controls, threat detection algorithms. What I didn't fully appreciate until recently was the human element, specifically how vulnerable we all are to betrayal by those we trust most." For the next hour, I shared my story, carefully omitting classified details of the FBI investigation, but offering a candid account of how my professional expertise had been weaponized against me through my personal relationship. The greatest security vulnerability in any system isn't technological, I explained. It's psychological. It's the trust we extend to others, the access we grant to those closest to us, and the blind spots we develop when emotional connection overrides professional caution. I discussed the compartmentalization that had allowed me to be vigilant at work while remaining oblivious at home. The cognitive dissonance that had helped me ignore warning signs, and the painful lessons I had learned about balancing trust with verification in all relationships. I'm not suggesting we become paranoid, I clarified. A life without trust is hardly worth living. But there's a middle path, one where we extend trust thoughtfully, maintain awareness of our vulnerabilities, and implement reasonable safeguards in both our professional and personal lives. When I finished speaking, the response was overwhelming. The question and answer session extended well beyond the scheduled time, with security professionals sharing their own experiences and concerns about personal vulnerability. Many admitted they had sophisticated security systems at work, but minimal protections at home, the same imbalance that had made me vulnerable. After the formal presentation concluded, a woman approached me, her conference badge identifying her as Dr. Eleanor Winters, Chief Security Officer for a major healthcare corporation. "That was incredibly brave," she said, extending her hand, "and valuable. We focus so much on external threats that we often neglect the insider risk, especially when it's emotionally complicated. It wasn't easy to share," I admitted, "but if it helps others protect themselves, it's worth the discomfort." "I'd like to discuss the possibility of you consulting for our organization," she said. "We're implementing new security protocols for executives with access to sensitive intellectual property, precisely the kind of situation you described. Your perspective would be invaluable." By the end of the conference, I had collected business cards from a dozen potential clients, all seeking insight into the human dimension of security that my experience uniquely qualified me to provide. Catherine joined me for dinner that evening, at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass, "and to turning pain into purpose." I clinked my glass against hers. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You would have found your way," she replied with characteristic generosity. "You're resilient, Michael, more than you realize." Later, that night, back in my apartment, I received an unexpected email from Agent Lynn. "Mr. Donovan, I thought you should know that we've made significant progress dismantling Krasnov's network using information from your ex-wife's cooperation. 3 major corporate espionage operations have been shut down, and we've recovered intellectual property valued at over $300 million. While Krasnov himself remains at large, his operational capacity has been severely compromised. Your willingness to assist our investigation despite the personal cost has made a substantial difference. I've attached a redacted transcript of Ms. Mercer's most recent debriefing. Page 17 may be of particular interest to you. Regards, Special Agent Emily Lynn." I hesitated before opening the attachment. Did I want to revisit this wound? What could Vanessa possibly say that would matter now? Curiosity won out. I scrolled to page 17 of the transcript, where the interviewing agent had asked about her motivations for cooperating so extensively with the investigation. Vanessa's response was surprisingly candid. "I've done enough damage to the companies, targeted to their employees whose innovations were stolen, and especially to Michael Donovan. He deserved none of what happened to him. My cooperation won't undo that harm, but it might prevent others from suffering similar betrayals." The interviewer had pressed, "So, this is about atonement?" Partly, she had replied, but it's also about reclaiming whatever small piece of myself isn't defined by deception. Before Krasnov recruited me, before I became Vanessa Collins, I had principles. I lost sight of those for money, for excitement, for the thrill of being someone who mattered in a dangerous world. I can't go back and undo those choices, but I can make different ones now. I closed the document, unsure how to feel. Was this another performance, aimed at securing better treatment? Or had Vanessa, Jessica, finally found some authentic remorse after the elaborate deceptions had crumbled? It didn't really matter, I decided. Her journey was her own now, as mine was mine. Whatever truth existed in her words wouldn't change the past or erase the betrayal. But it did suggest something important. Even after the deepest deception, honesty remained possible. Change remained possible. That, at least, was worth acknowledging. The following morning, I met with my business partner, Marcus Chen, to discuss expanding our consulting practice to include a new division focused on personal security for executives and high-net-worth individuals. The presentation was a game changer, Marcus said as we reviewed potential staffing needs. The waiting list for consultations is already 2 months long. We'll need to hire specialists in behavioral analysis, I noted. This isn't just about technical systems anymore. Marcus nodded, studying me with the perceptiveness that made him an excellent security consultant. How are you doing with all this? It's one thing to package your experience professionally, but emotionally. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Some days are harder than others, but there's something empowering about transforming a painful experience into something constructive. The ancient Japanese art of kintsugi, Marcus observed, repairing broken pottery with gold, making the damage part of the beauty rather than something to hide. I smiled at the apt comparison. Exactly. The break happened, denying it doesn't help, but highlighting it, learning from it, making it a feature rather than a flaw, that's healing on a different level. The next month was a whirlwind of activity. As we established the new division, developed specialized training programs, and began working with clients who had previously considered themselves invulnerable to targeted personal manipulation. One evening, after a particularly intense consultation with a technology executive whose company was engaged in sensitive international negotiations, I returned to my apartment to find a small package waiting at my door. After having it scanned for threats, a precaution that had become automatic, I opened it to find a simple leather-bound journal with a note from Catherine. For recording the wisdom you've earned the hard way. The painful lessons make the best teachers, but only if we remember what they taught us. Love, K. The journal was perfect. High quality but unpretentious, exactly my style. I ran my fingers over the smooth cover, appreciating my sister's thoughtfulness, and the symbolic encouragement to transform experience into insight. That night, I began writing, not about security protocols or threat assessments, but about trust, about how it forms the foundation of human connection, yet makes us vulnerable in ways no security system can fully protect against, about how the alternative, isolation behind walls of suspicion, offers safety at the cost of genuine intimacy, about finding balance between necessary caution and essential openness. Writing clarified my thinking in unexpected ways. The experience with Vanessa had been devastating, but it hadn't destroyed my capacity to trust. It had transformed it. Trust was no longer something I extended blindly or withheld completely, but something I offered thoughtfully, with appropriate boundaries and a clear-eyed recognition of risk. This new approach was already shaping my relationships. With clients, I was more transparent about limitations and potential vulnerabilities. With colleagues, I was more intentional about what information I shared and why. And in my personal life, I was slowly rebuilding connections based on mutual respect rather than unexamined assumptions. 3 weeks later, Dr. Eleanor Winters invited me to speak at a closed symposium for healthcare security executives in Seattle. The topic, protecting sensitive medical research from corporate espionage, hit close to home given Vanessa's targeting of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Your experience provides the perfect case study, Dr. Winters explained over lunch after my presentation. It illustrates how personal relationships can be exploited to compromise even the most secure systems. I just hope it helps strengthen your protocols, I replied. Medical research is uniquely vulnerable, valuable intellectual property combined with the researcher's natural inclination toward academic openness. She nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the challenge. We need security that protects innovation without stifling the collaborative spirit that drives progress. Our conversation extended beyond professional matters as the afternoon wore on. Eleanor, as she asked me to call her, had a sharp mind and dry wit that made discussing even serious security concerns engaging. By the time we parted, we had made plans to continue our conversation over dinner when she visited Portland the following month. Back in my hotel room that evening, I reflected on this unexpected connection. There was something refreshing about Eleanor's straightforward approach, her blend of professional competence and personal warmth. For the first time since Vanessa's betrayal, I found myself genuinely looking forward to getting to know someone better. The realization brought both hope and anxiety. Was I ready to trust again at that level? Would suspicion shadow any new relationship? These weren't questions with simple answers, but confronting them felt like progress. Evidence that I was healing rather than simply armoring myself against future pain. On the flight home, I opened Catherine's journal and wrote, "Trust after betrayal isn't about forgetting the wounds or ignoring the risks. It's about carrying the hard-earned wisdom forward while remaining open to new possibilities." The scars remind us where we've been, but don't dictate where we're going. 2 days later, Agent Lynn requested a meeting at my office. Her usual professional demeanor seemed slightly altered, an urgency in her movements that suggested significant developments. "We have intelligence suggesting Krasnov may attempt to re-establish operations in Portland," she said without preamble, once we were seated in my private conference room. "Why would he risk coming back?" I asked. "The FBI dismantled his network here, which makes it potentially valuable territory to reclaim. His operations in other regions have been compromised. By Vanessa's cooperation, Portland represents both unfinished business and a chance to rebuild." "Unfinished business meaning me," I clarified. Agent Lynn nodded grimly. "You disrupted his operations significantly. In his world, that creates a debt that requires balancing." The implication was clear. Krasnov might seek revenge for the damage I had helped cause to his organization. "What does this mean, practically?" I asked, already mentally reviewing the security systems in my apartment and office. "We're implementing surveillance at potential points of entry and monitoring communications channels he's used previously. We'd also like to place protective details." "No," I interrupted, "no protective details." Agent Lynn raised an eyebrow. "This is a credible threat, Mr. Donovan." "I understand that," I said carefully. "But I won't live under constant observation again, not even for protection." She studied me for a moment before nodding slowly. "I respect that decision, though I don't agree with it. Would you at least consider enhanced technical monitoring of your residence and workplace? No personnel unless a specific threat is detected." This seemed a reasonable compromise. "I can work with that, and I'll implement additional measures of my own." After Agent Lynn left, I sat alone in my office, considering the implications of Krasnov's possible return. The threat was concerning, but not paralyzing. Unlike my previous ignorance of Vanessa's deception, I now faced this danger with open eyes and full awareness. I called Marcus to brief him on the situation, then Catherine to warn her about potential surveillance of anyone connected to me. Both responded with concern, but not panic, evidence of the resilience we had all developed through the initial crisis. That evening, I implemented enhanced security protocols at my apartment, additional motion sensors, upgraded surveillance, cameras, and reinforced entry points. These were standard precautions for someone in my position, especially given the specific threat intelligence. As I completed the installations, I realized something remarkable. I felt prepared rather than afraid. The knowledge that Krasnov might target me again was certainly troubling, but it didn't dominate my thoughts or dictate my actions. I was taking reasonable precautions without surrendering to fear. This, perhaps, was the most significant transformation of the past 6 months. The betrayal had wounded me deeply, but had also forced me to develop internal resources I hadn't realized I possessed. Resilience, discernment, the capacity to face potential threats without becoming defined by them. The next morning, I received an unexpected phone call from Eleanor Winters. "I've been asked to consult on a security matter in Portland tomorrow," she said. "I wondered if you might be available for dinner afterward. Purely professional, of course." There was a warmth in her voice that suggested purely professional might be negotiable, and I found myself smiling as I agreed to meet her. "Fair. Warning," I added. "I'm currently implementing enhanced security measures due to a potential threat. Nothing immediate, but something to be aware of if you're going to be associated with me." Her response surprised me. "I appreciate the transparency. Most people in your position would either hide the risk or use it to appear more interesting." "Neither seems particularly productive," I replied. "Clear information about potential threats is just good security practice." "Exactly why I'd like to continue our conversation," she said. "Your approach aligns with my philosophy, realistic caution without paranoia." After we ended the call, I found myself looking forward to our dinner with unexpected anticipation. Whether the connection developed personally or remained professional, Eleanor represented something important: the possibility of new relationships built on a foundation of honest communication rather than illusion. The following week brought another development in Vanessa's case. Philip called to inform me that she had provided information leading to the recovery of nearly $90,000 of the money she had taken, funds that had been hidden in cryptocurrency accounts before her arrest. "She's specifically requested that it be returned to you as restitution," Philip explained. "No conditions attached." "Why now?" I asked. According to her attorney, she's been working with investigators to trace and recover these assets for months. "The process is complicated by design. That's why these accounts are used for hiding funds in the first place." I considered this information carefully. The money itself wasn't life-changing, but the gesture was significant. Vanessa could have kept the location of these funds secret, preserving resources for her eventual release. Instead, she had chosen to return what she had taken. "Transfer it to the corporate account," I decided. "We'll use it to fund security education programs for small businesses that can't afford comprehensive consulting." Philip seemed surprised by this choice, but he processed the paperwork without comment, transforming stolen funds into resources that helped others protect themselves. Felt right. Another way of converting damage into something constructive. 2 days later, Marcus and I finalized plans for a new initiative, the Transparency and Security Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to educating individuals and small businesses about personal and corporate security vulnerabilities. "We'll need a board of directors," Marcus noted as we reviewed the incorporation documents. "People with diverse perspectives on security challenges." I have some ideas, I replied, thinking of Eleanor Winters, whose healthcare security expertise would complement our technology focus, and Detective Reeves, whose law enforcement background would add valuable perspective. As we discussed potential board members, I realized how much my professional network had evolved over the past 6 months. The betrayal had initially threatened to undermine my credibility in security circles. Instead, it had connected me with a community of professionals who valued hard-earned wisdom over theoretical knowledge. That evening, I met Eleanor for dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. Our conversation ranged from security philosophies to personal histories, finding unexpected commonalities despite our different career paths. "You've transformed a devastating experience into a professional strength," she observed as we shared dessert. "That's rare. Most people either try to bury painful events or become defined by them." "I had good examples," I replied, thinking of Catherine's unwavering support and Marcus's practical partnership, and a realization that moving forward didn't mean forgetting what happened, it meant learning from it. Eleanor smiled. "Wisdom usually comes at a price. The question is whether we recognize its value once we've paid for it." As we walked along the riverfront afterward, I felt a sense of possibility that had been absent for months. Not just professionally, where my experience had opened new doors, but personally as well. The betrayal had changed me, certainly, but it hadn't diminished my capacity for connection. It had clarified what genuine connection required. 2 weeks later, the Transparency and Security Project held its first board meeting. Eleanor had agreed to serve, as had Detective Reeves and several other security professionals with complementary expertise. The mission we developed together went beyond technical security measures to address the human factors that often created vulnerability. "Security isn't just about locks and surveillance," I explained during my opening remarks. "It's about awareness, balanced trust, and realistic assessment of both technological and psychological risks." As the meeting progressed, I found myself energized by the collaborative spirit, the shared commitment to helping others protect themselves without succumbing to paranoia or isolation. This wasn't just professional satisfaction, it was purpose, born from painful experience. After the meeting, Catherine joined me for dinner at my apartment, bringing celebratory champagne for the successful launch. "You seem different," she observed as we ate, "more at peace." I considered this assessment. "I think I've finally stopped defining myself by what happened. It's part of my story, but not the whole story." She smiled. "That's what healing looks like, not forgetting or dismissing the pain, but integrating it into a larger narrative." Later that night, after Catherine had gone home, I stood on my apartment balcony looking out at the city lights. Portland had been the backdrop for both betrayal and recovery, for the unraveling of one life and the careful construction of another. I thought about Vanessa, serving her sentence and cooperating with authorities, about Krasnov, potentially planning to re-establish his operation, about Eleanor, whose clear-eyed approach to both security and personal connection offered a different model of relationship. The future remained uncertain, as it always does. Krasnov might return seeking revenge, or he might determine that the risk outweighed potential benefits. My growing connection with Eleanor might develop into something significant, or remain a valued professional friendship. The Security Education Initiative might transform industry practices, or simply help a handful of vulnerable individuals protect themselves better. What had changed wasn't the presence of uncertainty, it was my relationship to it. I no longer saw uncertainty as something to eliminate through control or surveillance, but as an inherent aspect of living an open, engaged life. The question wasn't how to eradicate risk, but how to navigate it wisely, maintaining appropriate boundaries without retreating behind impenetrable walls. In my professional capacity, I would continue helping clients implement effective security measures. In my personal life, I would practice the same principles, thoughtful trust rather than blind faith or reflexive suspicion. And in both domains, I would carry forward the hard-earned wisdom that betrayal had taught me, that security isn't about perfect protection, but about resilience in the face of inevitable vulnerability. I opened Catherine's journal one more time that night, writing what felt like a conclusion to one chapter and the beginning of another. The hidden camera revealed more than Vanessa's betrayal. It revealed my capacity to survive it, to learn from it, to build something stronger in its aftermath. The greatest security doesn't come from walls or surveillance or protective isolation. It comes from knowing your own resilience, from recognizing that even profound betrayal cannot destroy you unless you allow it to. True security isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's the presence of courage to remain open despite having been wounded. That's the paradox I never understood until I lived it. Our greatest strength emerges not from avoiding pain, but from transforming it into wisdom that lights the path forward. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.